I know that the Western Conference Finals just took place. Game one took place yesterday between the Clippers and the Suns, and I will touch on that in a moment. But I have to react first to Game 6 between the Clippers and the Jazz because it took place Friday night. This is Monday. No one's really had a chance to unpack everything that took place. And this Clippers team knocks off the Utah Jazz, the best record in the NBA, the number one seed, in one of the most perplexing manners I've ever witnessed. They trailed by 22 points at the half. Utah was rolling. They hit 12 three-pointers in the first half. Jordan Clarkson went off for 21 points in the first half, scored 17 straight for the Jazz to cap off a 21-2 run at the end of the first half. Donovan Mitchell was cooking. He ended up finishing the game with 39 points, 9 rebounds, 9 assists, made 9 of 15 three-pointers was Donovan Mitchell. This game, the writing on the wall was that the Utah Jazz were going to blow out the Clippers in Game 6, return to Game 7, and we'll see what happens. That's what it appeared. And the first bucket of the third quarter, three-pointer from Donovan Mitchell, puts him up 25. And then all of a sudden, Utah Jazz collapse and the Clippers prevail. You look up at the scoreboard, Donovan Mitchell was obviously gassed. He was faltering down the stretch, unfortunately, still hobbled by that ankle injury. And the Clippers pulled off perhaps the most shocking result of this postseason. And I've said this before about the Clippers. They are the most befuddling, mind-boggling team to try and evaluate this postseason. Really, you could argue the last 2 years. Because we all thought this team was dead in the water. And all of a sudden, we thought they were down for the count, and they resurfaced and got up off the mat multiple times. They obviously trailed not only in this game by 22 at the half, but you go into Game 5 without Kawhi Leonard. You win that game on the road. You go back to the series against Dallas. You lose your first 2 games at home. You're trailing 3-2 going to Dallas. You win that game. You win a Game 7. You become the first team ever to come back from 2-0 deficits to start the series, and you reach the Western Conference Finals for the first time in your organization's 51 years. You make history that way, and it's all sparked by a second-year player who was drafted 48th overall out of Florida State in Terrence Mann. Terrence Mann drops 39 points, makes 15 of 21 shots, 7 of 10 from the three-point line. He could not miss in this ball game. Paul George chips in, was fantastic, 28, 9, and 8. Reggie Jackson has been actually surprisingly consistent on offense, 27 points, 10 assists. Nick Batum with 16, he chipped in. The entire effort from the Clippers to rally from 25 points down and then take a 10-point lead, 116-106, midway through the fourth quarter, they outscored the Utah Jazz 81-47 in the second half. They made 14 of 19 three-point shots in the second half. They were 30 of 42 from the floor in the second half. And unfortunately, this has kind of been the motif for the Utah Jazz, blowing second half leads in the postseason. We obviously saw their debacle last year in the bubble. They led 3-1 against the Denver Nuggets. They blew that series. And now we see it again. And I still love Donovan Mitchell. And I love Quinn Snyder. I like this team, but they fell apart once again. And I remember thinking to myself that I truly hated, even as a Lakers fan, I hated the fact that injuries were playing such a crucial role in determining the outcomes of so many of these series. And when Kawhi Leonard went down, I truly hated that because we were robbed as NBA fans of seeing the best players on the biggest stages. And again, even though I wasn't necessarily rooting for the Clippers, I was rooting for an even matchup and a healthy matchup between two teams to really see. I wanted the Utah Jazz to beat the Clippers at full strength. And if the Clippers were going to fall down, I didn't want it to be because Kawhi Leonard was injured. And to their credit, there are a lot of sports organizations that would have just crumbled. They crumbled last year. And there are a lot of franchises that kind of are grouped together and clustered into this group of organizations that have annual shortcomings in the postseason that are just always marred with either controversy or postseason struggles. And there are certain franchises where you legitimately think to yourself, there is a black cat running around this organization. And they're just infecting everyone with some virus. And the Clippers were one of those organizations. You think back to the number of recent examples in which they were so close on the cusp of reaching the Western Conference Finals and they came short. 2015 against the Houston Rockets, they lead 3-2 up by 19 points late in the third quarter at home. And then you have Josh Smith and Corey Brewer going off with James Harden and Dwight Howard on the bench to win that game for you in Game 6, get the series back to Houston, and you win Game 7. In 2014, against OKC, on the road, Chris Paul, a member of the Clippers, turns the ball over twice in the final 17 seconds. Thunder end up getting fouled on a three-point attempt. Russell Westbrook makes all 3 free throws, and you win 105-104 in a crucial Game 5 on the road that would have put the Clippers up 3-2 with a chance to close out the series back in LA in Game 6. Obviously, last year against the Nuggets, up 3-1. There are countless examples of ways in which this team has clearly been cursed, and then they seem to not get a break with Kawhi Leonard's injury. And despite all that, they rise through the ashes. They prevail on the road. They overcome history. And to their credit, even as a Lakers fan, I concede there is nothing negative I can say about the Clippers. Sure, they may have taken a more circuitous route, but what we saw was Paul George actually start to embody his playoff P moniker, and the Clippers able to avoid their ignominious playoff track record of being awful in the postseason and being a disgrace. They avoided that. And so the one thing that I will say about the Clippers is this year, and I do think Ty Lue deserves a ton of credit. He should be extolled today and throughout this entire series. And the job that he's done with this franchise in the one season he's been there, his influence has rubbed off on them. He's been absolutely sensational. But I will say this, it is amazing to me what a lack of expectations can do for a team. It's amazing what you see from teams when there isn't any pressure, when there are no expectations heaped onto them. Game 5 against the Utah Jazz on the road was the first game the Clippers have played in perhaps the last 8 years in the postseason with legitimately no playoff pressure. No one was expecting them to win. They were playing with house money. Nothing to lose. And when I look at this Clippers team, that was literally the first game since before the Chris Paul era, since before he was traded, that you could honestly say this team wasn't facing any pressure. In Game 5, sure, there was some pressure in Game 6, but still no Kawhi Leonard, no expectations. And it's just amazing to me how much of a load that can just, how cumbersome that can be when you have that pressure. And then when you take off that pressure, how liberating that can be for a team. And I give major credit to the Clippers because they've answered the call. It hasn't been in the ways that we maybe as NBA fans would have liked, but they're at this point, and right now, I give them a solid chance against the Phoenix Suns, and that's how I'll